Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Aden Brook Podcast. This is episode 4, and today we're here with Haley Ruffner. Hey, Haley, how you doing?
Hey, Joe. Good. How are you? I'm excited to be here.
I'm doing great. Haley is one of our market experts here at Aden Brook. And Haley, how long have you been with Aden Brook for?
I've been with Aden Brook for a little over 2 years now.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I'm from Western New York, originally a little town called 𝗠𝗢𝗡𝗘, south of Buffalo. And I live in southern Colorado now. So I work with a lot of the farmers that we have here out west to help move their product to market. I actually got connected with Aden Brook in kind of a strange way. I was visiting my grandpa who winters near Ocala, Florida. And in order to spend some more time down there, I got a part-time job with a horse trainer in the area. And Steve Lim, who's the company vice president for Aden Brook, happened to have a horse in training with that trainer. So that's how I met Steve. And he saw me helping work with some of the horses, and we chatted a little bit, and he said, "Hey, do you want a job as a hay broker?" And it seemed like kind of a fluke thing. I had no idea that this was a career path before I learned about Aden Brook. I got connected in Florida with a company out of New York that happened to align perfectly with where I was living in Colorado at the time.
Wow, it's funny how things work out that way, especially obviously now with remote working as a possibility. It's great that you could be down in Florida, be here in New York, or be out in Colorado where you are right now and still work for the same company. It's great. And I know with Aden Brook, we have people all across the country that are working with us. So I think that diversity of viewpoints from all different parts of the country, I think really benefits us. And it's awesome too, just to be able to get to know people from all these different parts of the country too, and see how there's all these differences, but in many ways we're the same too.
It's very cool to be able to work with so many different people that are across the country and have different perspectives and can really offer specific insights based on where they're at.
You said that you were brought up in Western New York. How did you become interested in the equine world and the world of agriculture?
So I grew up on a family farm that had no animals on it. My grandfather and all my aunts and uncles used to raise cattle and draft horses and quarter horses. The family farm has been in my family for, I think, over 200 years. The little indoor arena on the property my mom helped build when she was a kid. But my grandfather passed away when my mom was 18, so before my time. But all of the animals got sold off and the barn just sat empty. All the pasture fence had been taken down. And then when I was about 5, I asked for riding lessons. So at that point, my mom got back into horses, and then kind of the rest of my family did as well. So we fixed up the barn, filled it back up with horses, and I've been riding ever since. And then my mom also runs a high school team and a collegiate riding team. She gives lessons. She does boarding at that farm still. So we've really kind of breathed life back into it, because when I was 5, I decided that I wanted to ride horses. So I think all of the family is happy to see some life back in that farm and to have the opportunity to kind of keep that going as a family tradition again. I grew up showing just 4-H and some local open shows. And now I show a little bit on the quarter horse circuit. I do a little bit of reining and ranch horse shows. I do some cattle sorting. And I also, in high school and college, rode on Alfred University's team, doing horsemanship, reining, hunt seat equitation on the flat, and a little bit over fences.
Wow, that's awesome. There's definitely a lot of different experiences you got there, but it's fantastic. The one thing I was very interested in by what you said is that the family farm was kind of going into disarray, and then you were able to breathe new life into the farm. That's fantastic. Throughout America, obviously, you see these small family farms that have kind of just faded away because of a lack of interest. So it's pretty amazing that through the love of horses and the equine world, you're able to reinvigorate and kind of re-energize the family farm. I wanted to ask you, do you have some memories that stick out to you from riding horses back in the day? When did you really discover your love of riding horses, and what are some memories that remain with you?
I think moving back to the family farm with my horse at the time was a really formative memory for me. I took lessons for several years before my parents finally broke down and bought me a horse. She was a little 2-year-old grade Pate mare that we got from a slaughter auction. I was 8 when I got her, which usually it's kind of a running joke in the horse community that you don't want to buy a young green horse for a young green rider. It's just never a good combination. But this horse took such great care of me. She was such a good sport. I remember our first time showing at the county fair, the warm-up pen was right next to all of the other livestock barns. And so they had pigs and geese and all kinds of loud, scary animals. And there's 9-year-old me on my 3-year-old pony, and we're doing our best to be brave right next to all of these scary sounding animals. And then on the other side is all these carnival rides. So I think it was a good exercise in courage for both of us. But then, yeah, it was just a really special thing to be able to move back to that family farm after spending months and months fixing up the stalls and rebuilding pasture fence, to kind of get back to the family homestead and take my first trail ride up on the hill overlooking the farm. That felt really special.
Eventually, you ended up competing in college. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in high school and college, I rode with Alfred University. I decided to go to school there mostly because of their English program, but a little bit because of the riding coach, Harry Hurd, who is like a grandfather to me. And he actually got me back into riding right after I lost that first horse that I just had that story about. We lost her to colic when she was 7. So that was pretty heartbreaking. And Harry got me back into riding, got me riding with Alfred. And how that is set up is it's catch riding. So I rode Intercollegiate Horse Show Association through Alfred University. And how that works is that you don't have your own horse and you don't know which horse you're going to ride for the show. So essentially you draw a horse at random, you can watch it warm up, and then you have to go and show it with kind of no other background information, no other warm up. So that it teaches you a lot about adaptability and having to get familiar very quickly with a horse that you don't know. And a lot of the times these are retired high-end show horses, and so they might be a little bit sour. They might not be thrilled to be there. And so you really have to go in and say, all right, we're in this together and we have to figure it out, which I think is a skill that's done me a lot of good in other situations in life too.
When it comes to riding horses and competing, it's very important that relationship you have with the animal, with the horse. How would you build a successful and strong bond with a horse? How would you go about that?
So I would say my best kind of showcase in terms of that would be that while I was in college, I got my now, 8-year-old gelding. I got him as a weanling, and Harry Hurd, my riding coach at Alfred, agreed to do an independent study with me when that horse was 2 years old so that I could get college credit to train my own horse, essentially, which was just a wildly cool opportunity. And so having had that horse since he was a weanling, since he was just a baby, and doing all of the groundwork with him, I broke him to drive before I broke him to ride. I ponied him around all over the place. I had so much time to spend with him as a baby that he turned into just such a pet, and he's almost dog-like in his demeanor just because I've spent so much time with him, which is a luxury that most horse trainers or people that are training horses for a business, they don't have the luxury of doing that. They just don't have the time for it. It doesn't make financial sense. But because this was just kind of my passion project, that I got this really cool gelding and had the opportunity to do everything with him myself, I think just the time spent attests to a lot of that, just building that trust and doing everything with him. And then I had an older horse that I would pony him off of. So that's, you are riding one horse and then leading another with you. So that helped expose the younger horse to a lot of situations too, just because my older horse, who was been there, done that, seen it all, not worried about anything, could also show Slide, who I was ponying, that yeah, nothing is a big deal. We don't have to worry about anything. We're good. Wow. And so I think that also transferred into when I started driving and riding him. He already had that kind of mental framework of, yeah, it's going to be fine. Haley wouldn't put me in a bad situation, so I'm going to be brave about it.
So you mentioned in college, you went primarily for English as your academic program. So how were you able to utilize English as your major with your passion for horses and the equine industry?
That is a great question. And I don't know why, but I think that English and horses mesh very well together. And it was sort of a running joke in my English program at Alfred that a lot of equestrians majored in English. But I think there's a lot of writing opportunity in the equine and agriculture world. And there's also maybe a little bit of a gap in some spaces between people that have the writing background and people that have the practical application background of having been in the industry and done things. And so I think being able to kind of straddle that, where I have the writing education and the writing background, but then I've also been in the horse and agriculture industry, has allowed me to kind of blend those two together in a way that I think works pretty well. I also had a coach in my high school years who was a managing editor for horsenation.com. So she gave me the opportunity to write a weekly column throughout my entire college career, just detailing my experience catch riding at IHSA and my experience as a collegiate equestrian. So she herself, having also been an English major and equestrian, was able to foster that drive in me as well.
When did you discover that you had a passion for writing and for English?
I think that was very early on. I've always been a very avid reader. And so I think that kind of naturally progressed into wanting to write stories and write essays, and just write about my experiences. I think I tend to process things best by writing about them. So even, for example, in this job where I'm constantly doing research on different hay products and different growing conditions in different areas and just general market research, I find that I process that best by writing about it. And so you'll find a lot of that writing in the Aden Brook blog, that I've done the research and written about it to make sure that I am understanding it correctly and that I'm understanding it well enough that I can write about it in a way that someone else will understand. So I think that's afforded me a really nice opportunity too.
Everyone out there interested, you should definitely check out the Aden Brook blog. Haley has been keeping that alive with very valuable information. So it's really a great resource. So everyone out there who's listening should definitely check out the Aden Brook blog. A lot of good tips there and a lot of good market information. But when we're talking about blogs now, and you're talking about Horse Nation and the blog that you were writing in college, what are some things you learned from the writing process there? And when it comes to, I guess, a lot of people, when they go to school for English, I would imagine that they think one day they're going to write a book or write some sort of larger publication. But it's interesting applying those English skills to the digital medium that we all operate in today, writing on a blog, and even when it comes to creating content for podcasts and things like that. What is it like writing for a blog, and how did that help you grow your English skills and your research skills as well?
I think in a lot of ways, especially in college with my course load and riding on the equestrian teams and also having a work study position, it was an exercise in resiliency, most of all, where I already was writing a lot just because of the course load that I had chosen for myself. And I think it would have been very easy to just say, I don't have the bandwidth to do this. But thanks to the encouragement of my old coach, who was giving me the opportunity to do the blog, it really forced me to sit down every week and say, okay, what's going on this week that I need to process? And also that I think it would be valuable to write about and would be valuable for other people to read about. So I think it really forced me to kind of slow down in an environment that didn't encourage that, and really have some kind of introspection going on, and forced me to process the world around me in a way that I think ended up being really valuable.
So you ended up graduating. And after that, what did you do after college?
After I graduated college, I went back to my old summer job working at my uncle's greenhouse in Western New York. on purpose because I wanted to have a free fall so that I could come out to Colorado and work as a wrangler for my uncle's horseback guided elk hunting business. So that had been a long time dream of mine, but hunting season was always during the school year, and so I couldn't get out here to do that. So after I graduated, I decided that was my time to go do that. So in September, I packed up and came out to Colorado to work as a wrangler for a month.
What's life like in comparison from Western New York going out to Colorado?
So that first time was a pretty jarring shift. And I think it was partly because of the way that we did it. So I drove out with my uncle who does that trip straight through. So 26 hours, we stop only to eat and use the bathroom, and it's straight through. So we got to Colorado, took a nap, got back up, and then started packing up for hunting camp, which is a pretty involved process just because of the way that it's set up. So we have a cook tent, we have a shower tent, we have an outhouse tent. We brought 5 or 6 horses, so that required a lot of gear, as you might imagine, too. So yeah, it was just a pretty wild shift in a really, really interesting way. And then when hunting season actually starts, my role as the wrangler is to get up and have the horses fed and saddled by breakfast, and then we ride out usually at 4 a.m., well before dawn, to get where we're trying to go by dawn when the elk start moving. And then we're just out in the mountains all day long. We ride back after dark. So that was just an amazing experience for me to get to see the West on horseback, which I think I just probably watched too many Westerns as a child just because that was such a dream of mine. And I really got to fulfill it and fell in love with Colorado doing that.
That's awesome. And I'm sure throughout the process, you develop a stronger bond with your horse, and you're able to learn more about the interaction between yourself and the animal. How did those experiences help you better understand the communication and the skills needed to build that successful and strong bond with your animal?
I think it's a really interesting shift also in just the horse culture between Western New York and Colorado. So my horses back home in New York are, by Colorado standards, incredibly spoiled. I'm cold hosing and icing their legs after a hard workout. They get blankets on when it's cold out. They're in their stall with fans on if it's hot out. And these horses in Colorado live outside year-round. No blankets, nothing fancy. No barn, no stalls, no real shelter except for some trees. And they are very, very hardy and very tough. They can ride all day through the mountains and stay saddled, and they're overall very, very just resilient and tough, I think, compared to my soft show horses back home. So that was really interesting to see as well, where that was kind of my first encounter with horses that weren't necessarily show horses or were much less of a pet than what I was used to. And I think that shows in their personalities as well, where my horses back home, if they've been ridden 2 days in a row, they're dragging their feet when they come out of the stall and acting overall pretty put upon. And these horses in Colorado will nicker to me when I come out of the tent, regardless of what time it is. And they're there to work, and they know their job, and they know they only really have to work 1 month out of the year. And I think one thing that stood out to me too was just kind of their sense of humor in the whole operation, where a lot of these hunters that would book elk hunts don't have much horse experience, and they're piling on these horses at 4 a.m. with a lot of gear on them, and they don't have very good balance at the best of times, and they're just not the most experienced, and they're riding in some pretty harsh conditions where these horses really, really have to take care of them. And to see them do that with just what seems to me like a sense of humor, and I'm sure I'm anthropomorphizing it quite a bit, is cool to see, where they side-eye me a little bit and give a big sigh when these hunters get on them for the 5th day. And I'm like, I know, buddy, we're almost done. Thanks for carrying him all week.
It's so funny, really. Horses have their own personalities, honestly. I mean, it's like, and every single one is different. They're their own unique individuals. And when you spend time with them, you really get to see those unique features. I mean, through life, we all have the experiences that we go through that make us who we are. And I mean, horses have that in their own way too. And so their personalities are always going to be different as well. It's a cool thing. It's interesting. So when did you finally end up meeting Steve and establishing that relationship with Aden Brook?
So that was about a year after I first came to Colorado. So I came out for the hunting season in 2019. And the next summer, I came back out just to visit for a while. I had a different remote job, actually editing college textbooks. And during the peak of COVID, I just needed to get out of my house for a little bit and I could work from anywhere. So I came out to my uncle's cabin in Colorado, intending to just spend a couple of weeks in some different scenery. And I ended up staying out here the entire summer because one of his close family friends was very sick and in the hospital all summer. And he asked me if I could stay out here to irrigate his hayfield for him. And turns out I could since I had a remote job. So I spent the whole summer out here working his flood irrigated hayfield, just patching dikes in the field, filling gopher holes, changing lanes, keeping an eye on the water situation all summer, and then helped cut and bale the hay later, and then stayed out here for hunting season. So 2 years after I first came to Colorado, after my experience of working the hay farm out here, I had been visiting my grandpa in Florida and met Steve that winter.
When you were growing up, you learned how to make hay in Western New York. Am I right?
Yes. So on our family farm, we just had a couple of small fields that grew enough hay just to feed our own horses. So it wasn't a big operation by any means. We were just putting up kind of whatever native pasture grass grew. It was pretty low maintenance. We just put up enough 2-string bales to fill our hayloft and feed our own horses.
Now, how did that compare with being out in Colorado and making hay there? I mean, you're talking about a much bigger operation. Were you able to transfer some of the skills that you learned back when you were in Western New York?
Yeah, I would say so. I think even though the conditions are wildly different, the kind of general principles stay the same of the maturity that you want to cut your hay at and how dry you want it to be before you put it in the bale. But other than that, yeah, the scope of the operations that you see out west versus my little family farm at home are just wildly different. And of course, water is a concern in both places, although kind of in different ways. Back in New York, we were lucky if we got enough dry days to let our hay dry and be able to bale it. Whereas out west, availability of water is becoming a huge concern, even more so over recent years. But that said, even out here in Colorado for our first cutting, we struggled to find 3 dry days in a row that we didn't have some rain showers to put up the hay. So I take that with a grain of salt, I guess, even though they are very different conditions. In a lot of cases, we still can find kind of similarities between the two.
So you have the experiences in Colorado, back in Western New York, in college, where you're doing research and you're writing. How have you taken all these experiences and utilized them here at Aden Brook? And can you just tell me a little bit about when you started? How did you find your footing with the company?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think coming into this position, I felt like my resume was sort of just a very random assortment of things that I wasn't sure how I could connect them. And somehow they all connect in this job specifically in a really cohesive way that surprised me. My writing background has allowed me to, I think, relate better to customers and farmers in that it's really improved my communication skills and allowed me to articulate, especially in writing, market updates and product research and all of that. And my experiences in the horse industry have given me a lot of knowledge and background in that field and allowed me to relate to a lot of my horse customers that I wouldn't be able to if I didn't have that background. And then also, yeah, my experience working on a Colorado hay farm has given me the ability to relate to a lot of the farmers out here in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to. So yeah, I think those things, even though on paper they look completely random, and I was really struggling with how I was going to connect those in a meaningful way in a career going forward, but they've really meshed well, I think, in this specific role and allowed me to find my footing. Because initially when I started, most of my connections in the horse world are back home in Western New York, where I did most of my showing, where I went to college, where I grew up. And so trying to kind of start from scratch in that respect in Colorado was a little bit intimidating, just because I don't have those same relationships out here and I don't have that same depth people connections that I can call on, I guess, as I would back home. And so I think having the confidence that even though my community, I guess, is not out here quite yet, I have the ability and all of the tools that will let me build one out here really helps me to get my feet under myself and stay confident even in those early days.
That's awesome. So what is it you exactly do at Aden Brook?
I am an agricultural sales broker and I move products to market. So what that looks like is that I work with farmers and trucking companies and customers to move products for the farmers, organize the freight, and also on the customer side to find products that they're looking for that they may not have access to otherwise and get them delivered at a fair market price.
Sounds like with all of that involved, all the logistics there, you may have some unforeseen issues that come up from time to time. How do you deal with problem solving in your position? I'm sure there's so many moving pieces. How are you able to string everything together and make it work?
Absolutely. There are a lot of moving pieces. And I think one of the ways that we really can provide value as brokers is that we're sort of a buffer between farmers, truckers, and customers. So when something goes wrong, it's our problem and it's not on any of those groups of people to necessarily work that out or fix themselves. That's where we really step in and are able to problem solve for them and come to a conclusion that benefits everyone. And yeah, in this question, I have to give a shout out to my really great local network of truck drivers who really take the time to follow directions and help customers out when they can. I've had local truck drivers who can unload themselves at my customers' facilities and really provide kind of an additional level of service that is otherwise pretty tough to get in this business. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of problem solving, and I don't even know that it's a job hazard. I think it's just kind of when you're in this business, things like that are going to happen, and you just have to go into it with that mindset of there are going to be problems today and I will solve them today, and it's not going to be a big deal and it's not going to be the end of the world for anyone.
It's definitely a lot to undertake as a job, and being a market expert, being an agricultural sales broker. But what is it that continues to inspire you working here and give you purpose in your role?
I think one thing that really inspires me, and maybe one of the more rewarding parts of this job, is the potential for helping people, especially given the time that I started at Aden Brook. A lot of my book of business has been in Texas, and they've been really hit hard by drought in the last couple of years. Thankfully, this summer, it's not as bad as it has been the past couple of years. But most of the book of business that I built in my first couple of years at Aden Brook has been customers that are really, really stricken by the drought that's hit Texas, and they haven't had access to the hay that they normally would have, or it's exorbitantly expensive. And so I've been able to step in and find the products that they're looking for and point them in the right direction for the freight programs that the government had offered as kind of a drought relief operation. So that's been really rewarding, just to make sure that even though I have a very small part in it, to make sure that I'm helping keep their animals fed in a really tough situation.
So you obviously bring a lot of equine knowledge to Aden Brook. What are the types of customers and the types of facilities and operations that you work with?
So I initially started sort of in my comfort zone with mostly horse customers. So performance horse facilities, boarding barns, horse trainers, operations like that, show facilities. And since then, I've branched out quite a bit to working with a lot of feed store customers. And in the last couple of years, I've also really started to get into the feedlot and dairy industries. So Cosmos often refers to me as kind of a utility knife broker. I also tend to work with some ranchers in Texas. So I sort of have have customers in a bunch of different areas, but I would say for the most part, my biggest kind of volume customers are the dairies and feedlot customers that I work with in Texas. And part of that is because of where I'm located. A lot of this hay grown in the San Luis Valley in Colorado goes down into that Texas panhandle to a lot of those bigger dairies.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. So obviously you're bringing a lot of this equine knowledge to Aden Brook that you accrued over the years, but you're working a lot with the cattle operations now. So what have you had to learn on the job to help further your knowledge when it comes to the cattle industry?
I had to learn everything about cattle because I came in knowing almost nothing. And because a lot of the farmers that I'm working with out here sell their hay to the dairy industry, I had to get learned up pretty quickly in order to do a good job servicing them. So it was a lot of research and a lot of also just learning from these farmers that have been in the industry for much longer than I have. They've really been just an invaluable resource and so willing to answer a lot of my just silly, uninformed questions that I had early on. So that's really been so helpful, and I'm very thankful to me that they didn't laugh me out of the room when I rolled up knowing a lot about horses and nothing about cows. So I definitely appreciate them for that. But yeah, it's been a steep learning curve for me in terms of the cattle industry as far as looking at what milk prices are doing and what beef prices are doing to kind of have a finger on the pulse of that side of the market, and then also how much hay is getting put up that's dairy quality versus what are the feedlots looking for, and just kind of learning how those two markets play off of each other.
How do cattle customers and equine customers compare with each other?
They're completely on different ends of the spectrum, I would say, in terms of what they're looking for. Most of the horse customers that we work with are buying almost purely on aesthetics of the hay. They want it to be green. They want it to smell nice. They don't want it to be dusty. They want it to have good leaf. They want it to be soft to the touch. So it's a lot of just kind of sensory aspects to the hay that don't necessarily mean much in terms of its nutritional quality. But horse people, generally speaking, don't ask for a nutrition test. They're not looking at it specifically unless they have a horse with some metabolic issues that they need a specific test for. But most of them are feeding what they've always fed or feeding what their trainer or mentor back in the day fed. And there's not a whole lot of interest in looking at a test. And that's not to say that that's across the board for everyone. I think there is more growth in the horse community as far as starting to look more into the nutritional side of their hay and looking into more forage-based diets for their horses, because there's more and more research that is healthier than basing the nutrition on the grain and then just supplementing with hay. So I don't suspect that will be the case forever. I think more and more horse people will start to look at the nutrition tests as well as just what the hay looks and smells and feels like. But then on the other side of the spectrum is the cattle market, where they might not care if there's some mold in the hay. They're primarily looking at a test. And of course, they want to know how it's stored and they want to know if there is mold, but that might not be a completely prohibiting factor like it would be for a horse customer. So there's just a little bit more leeway in terms of what they're looking for. In most cases, they will consult their nutritionist before they're pulling the trigger on anything. And so for them, having the test and having the assurance of volume that they're looking for to keep their ration consistent is much more important than just the aesthetic qualities of the hay.
How often are you on the ground visiting these locations, whether it be the customer side or the vendor side? How often are you in the field?
I think it really varies depending on the time of year. I try to be on the road, I would say, a couple times a month at least. And for the most part, with my local farmers, I can kind of split my day up. For example, last week, I was out pulling tests on a lot of the first cutting that got pulled up. And so I spent maybe a couple days total throughout several days in the week running around to different stacks to meet with farmers, to pull tests on their hay, to get accurate pictures, just to make sure that we're presenting the most accurate representation of what the hay is to our customers.
So before you're bringing up the importance of nutrition, and I know here at Aden Brook, we are really trying to talk up the benefits of forages and how forages are such a healthy alternative to your standard feeds that a lot of people have been feeding their animals for years and years. Like you said, it's kind of the feed options that they just have always fed. So we're really trying to pivot towards forages as the healthier alternative. How often do customers ask you questions about nutrition and specifically different varieties of hay and how those varieties may impact their animals?
I think in the equine sphere, often it's me starting the conversation on what are you currently feeding and why is that in your feed program? Just to kind of spark curiosity on different options that are available, rather than trying to railroad someone into a feeding system that I think is nutritionally best, that without knowing enough about their animals and their program to really be able to assess that for them. So yeah, I think it's a lot of just back and forth and asking questions to see what works best for their program and what kind of the cost breakdown is on a lot of it in terms of price per pound of various kinds of feed, whether it be grain or hay. So yeah, I would say more so than just straight offering advice, I'm asking questions, because I also have been in business for much less time than most of my farmers and customers. So for me, I think it's still more of a learning opportunity than it is an opportunity for me to give advice to someone.
In addition to nutrition, very important feature are market conditions when it comes to being a sales broker and a market expert here at Aden Brook. We really have to be ahead of the curve when it comes to how the markets are reacting to specific conditions and how we were able to incorporate those market conditions and those events into the sales process and the logistics and supply chain behind everything. How often do you follow up with what the market is doing, and how important is that for you in your role?
I would say that's incredibly important, especially as I'm leaning more into the cattle side of the market, because they are really at the whims of what the hay market and the beef market and the milk market are doing. And so really staying on top of what's happening in those markets and where prices are at is the only way to make sure that I'm bringing the right products as options to them, and also that we're staying at a fair market price. And I think my best resources for that have just been talking to my customers and vendors, because again, most of them have been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and they've seen the markets rise and fall, and they have a really good idea of what to look for. And so are my local truckers, and that they are delivering so much hay that we don't necessarily move, that they really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on at the dairies and how much hay they have in stock and what products they know they've been moving. So yeah, just the people that I work with, I think, are my greatest resource in terms of keeping updated on all of those. And especially given that we have brokers across the country who are really firsthand seeing what a lot of these changes are doing to the market and seeing what's moving, in some cases controlling what's moving, I think really gives us an edge in terms of being updated and knowing what's going on in the market.
We're talking a lot about market conditions, nutrition, and all the things that go into being a successful market expert and sales broker. Can you tell me a little bit about your favorite customers and favorite vendors that you work with, and truckers as well? Because sometimes we think about all these big topics about the market, but we lose sight sometimes of the day-to-day interaction with the people that we work with that really make everything possible. So can you share with me a little bit some experiences, some memories you have working with all the people that you work with every day?
I think I have to preface this with that I feel incredibly lucky to have the book of business that I do, and everyone that I work with is truly lovely and has been so patient with me, especially when I was first starting out as a broker. And yeah, I'm just very appreciative for the customers, the vendors, and the truckers that I work with, because they really, in most cases, make my job so much easier and make me look forward to doing my job every day. I'd say one of my favorite stories about a farmer that I work with is we have a gentleman that we work with up in Riverton, Wyoming, who puts up some nice alfalfa. And we've sold his hay for a number of years, but I had never met him before. And I happened to be passing through the area. So he said, yeah, stop on by. In that year, he wasn't particularly happy with the quality of hay that he had put up. So he was electing to keep it and just feed it to his own cattle instead of having us market it because he just didn't feel that the quality was there. But even so, even though there was no monetary benefit to him in having me stop by and meet with him, he still spent several hours taking me around to see his cattle and showing me the whole farm and telling me how he got into business in the first place. And showing me all the renovations that he had done on his house and the elk mounts and whatnot that he had in there. So I think that was just a really cool testament to the relationship building that this job affords. At the end of the day, it's more about the relationships than it is just about the transactional aspects. So that was one that sticks out in my memory.
Would you agree that having the interaction that you have every day with all the people that you're solving problems for, that's probably the most rewarding aspect, right?
Oh, absolutely. The being able to take something that, for example, if a customer had ordered a load of hay direct from the farmer themselves and they set up the trucking and maybe the trucker gets there and haven't tarped it completely and some of the bales are moldy. Whereas if they work with us, that's something that we can completely take care of. We'll work with the freight company to get a credit on the bales that are off quality because the tarp was incorrect, or we'll work with the trucker to schedule delivery in the first place. Just our ability to kind of be in there as a buffer and solve those problems for the customer instead of them having to try and get back a hold of the farmer and then see if they can get a hold of the trucker's dispatcher or freight broker to solve any issues. We're just so well equipped to do those things because we do them every single day that it's just not that big of a deal to us, and we're happy to do it and happy to help. And I think that ability just takes a lot of weight off of our farmers' shoulders, off of our customers' shoulders, and just allows us to save everyone a little bit of time.
Are there moments that you can recall that you were able to solve a problem, something that either something on the logistics side or something when it comes to the actual product itself, and turn that into a success?
One example that I can think of offhand is I had a new customer right in Colorado, and it was her first time working with us. So she was getting this load of hay, and I was able to use one of my really good local drivers to haul it. And it was in the wintertime, and this driver was loaded and on his way. And the customer was, I think, having just a really hard time overall. I think her schedule was really busy. She was having a really hectic day. And she called me and she was like, my person that was supposed to be here to unload is not showing up. I don't know where they're at. Also, it's snowing. I don't know if I can run the loader. This is a really bad day for a hay delivery after all. And I was able to just give my local driver a call, and he said, no problem. I'm comfortable running her loader. If she's good with that, I can unload this hay for her. I'll get it put in her barn. And so I was able to, without actually doing anything myself, except for making a call to this truck driver, he was really able to kind of step in as the hero of the day and make the delivery seamless for her in a way that I don't think she was expecting, in a way that really made her day much easier, I think, than it could have otherwise been. So yeah, that's one that sticks out to me. I have another one that is also logistics related. So this was maybe a couple of years ago now. It was fairly early on in my career at Aden Brook, but I was delivering a load of 3-tie alfalfa from Wyoming to Maryland. And the truck got there. This was through a logistics brokerage, so this was not a trucker that I knew. But the driver got there and climbed up on top of the load of hay to start unstrapping and taking the tarps off of it. And for reasons unknown, took what seems to be an intentional swan dive off the top of his truck onto my customer's driveway. And so I had the customer calling me being like, hey, I think this driver's injured, but there's a language barrier, so we don't know exactly what's wrong, but he's laying in the driveway moaning. He doesn't seem to want us to call an ambulance. What do we do? So that's not a situation that we encounter every day by any means. And also is not a situation that our excellent, experienced freight broker had encountered before. But because the freight broker was so experienced, he was able to get a translator, figure out that the driver actually was fine. He had just knocked the wind out of himself. But in the meantime, while we were figuring this out, my customer had brought this driver out some water to give him at least some comfort while he was laying there in the driveway. And at the end of the day, the truck got unloaded. The driver was fine. There wasn't very much of a time delay. And afterwards, the driver's dispatcher called my customer to say, this driver is saying you were an angel. You brought him water. He's so thankful. And so I think that's a good example of the kindness of the customers that I work with and just the efficiency of these freight brokers that even in just kind of wild situations like that, we're able to make it pretty streamlined at the end of the day, and it all shakes out in the end and everyone leaves pretty happy.
It's funny. It's the things that you see being a broker here at Aden Brook. That's pretty funny.
And honestly, a huge testament to this freight broker who's been in the business forever. And I remember telling him what had happened on the phone. And I think he was quiet for a solid 5 seconds. And he was like, that's one I've never heard before.
Yep.
I'm glad that driver's okay.
With Aden Brook being a agricultural brokerage, a lot of people, when they are getting their hay or getting their agricultural supply with the hay, straw, and shavings, for a lot of people, they may think that it's easier to directly contact a farmer and try to get hay directly from the farmer or directly get hay from a supplier. What are the benefits of working with an agricultural brokerage like Aden Brook? And how do you market the company when it comes to the services that we provide and how we are in many times a better alternative to just working with the farmer that's right down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely one that I find myself answering almost every day. But I think one of the main things that I focus on in answering that question for potential new customers who may have very valid reservations about working with a brokerage is that quality assurance is a big part of Aden Brook. And if we ever send you a load of hay that shows up and it's not what it was supposed to be, for whatever reason, maybe we're at the end of a stack and there are some off-quality bales, maybe the farmer loaded the wrong product, maybe it was stored differently than we had thought it was, maybe it wasn't tarped fully on the truck. There's a myriad of reasons that hay could show up and it's not what you expected, and that's just part of the business, but we're so equipped to deal with that, where if that does happen, you can reject that truckload. We turn it around at no cost to you, we find a new home for it, and we find something that's better suited to you. So of course, this is a pretty rare occurrence, and it's a headache when it does happen, and so we avoid that at all costs. But that's something that I like to share with potential new customers just to kind of show that it's in my best interest to send you hay that you're going to like, because I don't want to have to reroute a rejected truck. But of course, you do have that option. And I think it's also a quality assurance that we have so many brokers scattered across the country in that we're able to go look at almost every stack of hay that we're moving. So you have a market expert and someone with a good amount of experience in the field getting these pictures for you, pulling the tests, looking at the hay. They can tell you if it smells good, if that's what you're worried about for your horses. They can tell you the moisture levels, if it might be dusty or not. But yeah, you have a really quality team behind you in that decision-making process in matching the best product to you in terms of what you're looking for. I think another advantage that we offer is that we work with so many different farmers that if one farmer runs out of a product, we're able to find a very similar quality and probably very similar priced product to fill in that gap so that you're not changing your feed standards throughout the year, depending on what's most readily available. We're able to keep that pretty consistent for you, which especially with horses is a huge concern because quick changes in their diet can cause a whole slew of problems that no one wants to deal with. And then again, as we touched on before, that we act as a buffer between the farmer and the trucker and the customer. And so if you're looking for a product that you haven't sourced before, we're saving you a lot of time and legwork in finding a product, vetting the farm it's coming from, making sure that it is what you're looking for, and setting up the trucking. So I think especially for our customers are very busy and they have better things to do than spend their time vetting different hay sources and looking for new hay and making sure that the quality is there, because it is a big commitment to order a full semi-load of hay. And so because we are scattered across the country and kind of have boots on the ground in different areas, our ability to kind of take that off your plate, I think, brings a lot of value to the table.
So, Haley, we're getting towards the end of the interview. Again, I want to thank you for your time here today. I want to ask you, where do you think you see yourself in 5 years here at Aden Brook?
I would like to have expanded my network of farmers so that if a customer calls me looking for a product, I, every single time without fail, will have it readily available for them. And then kind of in the same vein on the vendor side, especially because I'm in the same community as a lot of these farmers that I'm working with, it's very rewarding, and I feel really obligated to help them with their hay and to see them do well and get a fair market price. So I think in 5 years, I would also really like to be able to move every batch of hay that comes available in the San Luis Valley to really help these farmers out to the best of my ability.
How could people get in touch with you, and how would you get, if someone is out there and they're listening to this podcast and they're interested in establishing a connection with Aden Brook, how would they go about doing that?
For those looking to get in touch with Aden Brook, you can call our main sales line at 800-747-3811. For my contact information, my email is hruffner@adenbrook.com, and my number is 716-790-1636. We also have on our website a Meet the Team section. So if you look through all of our brokers, and you can kind of pick and choose and see who's more local to you or who seems like they might be the best fit, and pick from our very qualified team of market experts.
That's great. And Haley, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss here today?
Not that I can think of, but thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, you do such a great job with these podcasts. I'm very excited to be involved.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you bring to Aden Brook, all the experiences. It's great to hear the stories that you shared today and all the experiences that you've had in the past. It's I think it's very valuable, and it's great that you bring that here to Aden Brook. So, Haley, I want to thank you again for your time today. It's been great, and I hope you have a great day, okay?
Sound good. Thank you so much, Joe. You too.